Jennifer, welcome to Life in Six Strings. How is everything with you? I know it's all a little bit crazy where you are right now.
Yeah, it's insane. In my town, it's the worst air quality in the world. It's hazardous. So I left. Well, you can see a cat behind me. I have two cats and two dogs in a hotel room right now.
Oh my God.
So
So normally I would do the show with we'd both have guitars and stuff, but obviously you didn't have a chance to grab everything. I mean, that's a bit scary, not knowing what you're going
well,
to get back to.
I do have guitars, but firing up an amp in a
In
hotel
a
room
hotel
probably
room.
wouldn't go over.
You'll
Yeah,
be kicked out, won't you? Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Oh God. So okay. So I don't know if you know the premise of the show. Basically, I decided to. Well, I'm a music journalist and TV presenter, and I've always wanted to play the guitar, but never had the time. And then when lockdown happened, I was like, well, now's the time, girl. So I started to learn how to play the guitar, and I'm absolutely loving it. And I thought, well, let's chat to other guitarists to sort of talk about their journey playing and how it sort of influenced your life and stuff. So I guess my first question to you is kind of like, how did this all start for you? Where did this love affair of the guitar come from, and how did it begin?
Well, there were two things that happened at once when I was 8 years old, and one was the Beatles hit America, and that was a big deal. Everybody in my town was trading Beatle cards and getting Beatle boots, and you know, every
Yeah.
time a new record would come out, we'd go to each other's houses and share. And the other one was my sister had a guitar and I didn't, and I was very jealous. So that was a big motivator. So the next Christmas, I asked my parents for a guitar, and it was kind of unusual back then, but I got an electric guitar for my very first guitar and started taking lessons right away.
But that's true. That is unusual, isn't it? Because that's what I decided to start on the electric, and everyone starts on acoustic. So why did you do electric rather than acoustic?
It was, I didn't specify to my parents. I just said I wanted a guitar. And my dad was into guitar too. He always played guitar, not professionally, but
Yeah.
he had a jazz, a Gibson 175 that I ended up inheriting. And I think he was inspired by the electric. So he had an amp already, so he didn't have that expense to add to it. So it was, I think that's one of the motivators of why I kept it up, because it was an electric like I would see the Beatles and the Stones and the
Yeah.
Monkees have on TV.
Yeah, so I guess like some of your influences, you could all of a sudden be them. And can you remember the first thing that you learned to play? I mean, did you have lessons, and did you learn learn the hard way?
I had lessons on and off my whole life. Yeah. Uh, I think the first lesson in a music shop was learning how to read and learning the basic chords, maybe playing Yankee Doodle. My dad taught me a melody from, there was a jazz drummer named Chico Hamilton that had a ton of records out,
Yeah.
and it was a Charles Lloyd song called Forest Flower. So I learned the melody to that.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And then you went on to study like hardcore music, didn't you? A music school. I mean, that must have
Yeah.
been pretty full on.
Oh, it kicked my butt. In fact, I flunked the test to get in because although I had been taking lessons since I was 8 years old, um, when I took the test to get into, it was called GIT at the time. Now it's called MI, Musicians Institute. I flunked because although I had learned a lot of songs and techniques, I was never taught the tools of the trade. I didn't know chord scales. I didn't know uh, the difference between a G7 and a G major 7. So I knew a bunch of scales and blues scales, but I didn't know diatonic scales and harmonic minor.
Oh
So I
my
had to go
God.
study real hard for 6 months, and with a jazz player in San Diego named Peter Sprague, really great player, and that got me prepped for the school. So 6 months later, I was able to get in.
Oh wow. So how old were you when you went there then?
20.
20. Okay. God, and you'd started playing when you were 8, so you'd been playing for quite a while. And so
Yeah.
who was the guitarist, or the song that kind of really changed it all for you, that made you realize that actually, you know, this is going to be my path for the rest of my life? I'm in.
Yeah, I don't remember a specific song, but I think it was maybe the era of Robin Trower when
Yeah.
those records came out in the 70s. Yeah, it was just so guitar oriented, all the music. And well, okay, when Jeff Beck came out and was on the radio, that that just turned my life inside out. And at one point, I learned all of the solos on his records, Blow by Blow and
Yeah.
Wired. Yeah,
Which,
but I remember announcing to my mother when I was 12 that I wanted to be a professional musician, and her response was, "Well, honey, you know that's a very competitive business. And when you're 12, that means nothing."
no, you're like,
So,
you can do whatever you want when you're 12. Like, the world is your oyster.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my God.
sometimes I think I should have listened to her, but I kept it up anyway.
No, you shouldn't have listened to her. I mean, look at the incredible life that you've had.
Yeah, a lot of amazing experiences for sure. Just feeling pretty beat up right now from 30 years of flying around the planet and getting broken guitars and missing luggage, and that's people don't realize what goes into touring
No,
unless they've
I
done
mean,
it.
yeah, because that's funny. I mean, like, you have been on some of the biggest tours in the world, like when you're with Michael Jackson, and then you played with Jeff Beck, like your hero. Um, I mean, do you miss those type of tours or not?
Yeah, well, that's like the Club Med of touring, when you have somebody in charge of everything, and all you have to do, for instance, on the Michael Jackson tour, as long as we had our luggage packed and outside of our hotel room door, we didn't have to lift a finger. Somebody would take it for us and it would be
Yeah,
placed in the next hotel room. So that kind of touring is super easy, and if flights are canceled or connections are missed, not your problem. Somebody else takes care of it. But for most of that time, I've been on my own, where I'll, for instance, fly to Europe and then meet a band that I've never played with before, rehearse for 4 hours, and then we start the tour that night. So it's pretty stressful.
yeah, that is a different side to it, isn't it? For sure. I mean, and you, I mean, you got in a camper van, didn't you? And you traveled around doing the self-empowerment for modern musicians. It was like a seminar that you did around the US, wasn't it? Did you
Yeah,
ever go to
I
Europe
did.
with it?
No, and I just sold that motorhome last Friday, right before the fires.
Oh my
The time
God.
sucks. So, but I put over 60,000 miles going around America, mostly doing a solo multimedia show where I play tunes in sync with films that I make. So I carry a projector. In
Yeah.
fact, I do that around the world, where my carry-on is two laptops, two projectors in case one goes down, and then I can do a show anywhere by myself.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it costs a hell of a lot more to take a band on the road. And even when I'm touring with a band, I had an agent in Italy that booked several band tours, and you can't always get the money you need for a band every night of the week, but you can usually get at least enough money for just me.
Yeah.
So, the band might have stayed in Rome and I fly to Madrid for a night and I can still do my solo show.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that makes it a lot easier. I guess that's the beauty of the modern day world now, because like back in the day, you couldn't have done all that. You didn't have all this technology, did you? I guess.
Yeah, back in the day I would have to sing. That would be sad.
That's like my guitar teacher. He's saying to me, "You've got to sing along with the songs," and I'm like, I cannot sing. Like, and as soon as I try to open my mouth and sing, my hands do a completely different thing. It's like there's no connection between the two right now. I'm like, I'm so far away from being able to sing and play at the same time. But So where did it start for you with the kind of experimenting with, like, because I know you love your pedals and your gear and stuff. I mean, where did that start? Was that kind of when you started working with Jeff Beck? Because I know that must have, I mean, that's another question I want to ask you as well, like working so closely with another guitarist. I mean, that must have been interesting as well. But so where did the kind of gear side of it come into it?
Well, I think pedal addiction is something that just comes with electric guitar playing. It's just part of the culture. And in my early bands, I was in a cover band where the bass player and I had a competition who could fill up a power strip fastest. So I
Who
always
won?
won.
Yeah.
But so I've been into, I've been fascinated by sounds for a long time. And after the Bad tour, I got hooked up with the Digitech company. And I ended up doing many, many clinics around the world demoing their gear. So then I was forced to get into programming. So,
Right.
which was great. Sometimes it's like bullet to the head. You got to get this together to work. And
Yeah.
it was the same with Jeff Beck because when I played with him, he was perfectly happy to have me only play guitar, but I knew that I needed to get guitar synth together because he had 30 years of records with the backdrop was all synthesizer sounds.
Hmm.
So I had to get that together, and I never would have put in that kind of time if it was just me on my own. So I'm really grateful for the pressure.
Sometimes you need that, don't you, to just push you to that next level. But so what was it like working with Jeff Beck then? Obviously, he's a big hero of yours, incredible guitarist, and then you get the opportunity to work with him. I mean, first of all, were you scared?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I never thought about playing with him before because he had always had keyboard players.
Yeah.
It never was even a dream of mine. I just wanted to meet him and get an autograph. And there was a guy that worked on the Bad tour with Michael Jackson, the keyboard player Rory Kaplan, that had done some tech work with Jeff when he was with Jan Hammer. And he knew I was really into Jeff's music, so he said, I'll introduce you. And he never did, the
Ah,
bastard.
bastard,
So
yeah.
the next time, the next tour that came up was the Dangerous tour, and I knew we were going to England, and I knew Jeff lived in England, so there had to be a way to connect the two.
Yeah.
And so I, I invited him to a show at Wembley Stadium, and long story, Michael canceled the show, but I ended up meeting Jeff anyway. And my first record had just come out, so I gave him a copy of that. And also in England, I had done a video for Flight of the Bumblebee where I was covered with live bees,
Please, I remember I've seen
just
that.
trying to
Yeah.
sell records.
NASA.
Yeah, I had just been given a PAL format video from the MTV over there, and I couldn't play it at home, and so I gave him a copy of that also. And I thought, great, I got my autograph, and I would go on my way, and I thought I'd never see him again. And lo and behold, he called me up a month later or so and said, I finally had a chance to listen to your record, and let's record together. And that just blew my mind right apart. And it was actually 5 years went by before it happened, but he called me up eventually and said, I got a tour, come on, which was an incredible leap of faith on his part. And by that time, I had two records out, so he had both of those. And he didn't even audition me, and we hadn't even played together.
Oh my God.
So no, so I had a session in Italy, and so I was going to be on that side of the pond, and I booked myself to London, and I learned most of the Guitar Shop record just to play it in his presence as forcing an audition on myself to make sure that he wasn't just crazy, you know?
Yeah.
And it was such a huge gig for me. I didn't tell anybody that I was up for it because it would have been so embarrassing to, yeah, I'm playing with Jeff. Oh, no, I'm
No,
not.
I'm not. Yeah. So what did you play when you kind of auditioned for him then in the end?
It was most of the songs on the Guitar Shop record
The
with
guitar shop
Tony
record, yeah.
and
Okay.
Terry Bozzio, a trio record. So I got the guitar synth happening and played some of those sounds for him. So
And you
it
obviously
worked
did.
out. We
You
ended up,
obviously did well. Yeah, you impressed him. So okay, so then obviously then you make some records with him as well. You did 2 albums with him, didn't you? And I mean, when I heard Brush with the Blues, I was completely floored by that. I mean, how did that come about, that song, and what did you think of it when you heard, the masterpiece at the end? I mean, what was your reaction to that song?
uh, when I joined the band, Jeff was pressured to get a record out, and he had done a bunch of songs that he didn't want to release, and so Tony Hymas was busy writing. And in fact, most of the time I was with him, I was writing stuff and submitting it as well. And Brush with the Blues is right in his wheelhouse because although he can do like real hardcore hard rock slash metal, he would say hate it if I said metal, but you know, he invented the genre to some degree.
Yeah.
And but he's one of those players that can go from 11 down to a whisper. And so he's very comfortable playing super sensitive music that a lot of players would fail at. And I was so into his music. I would listen for hours and hours and hours to everything he had done since the Yardbirds. So I was very familiar with the stuff, and it was just one of the tunes that, as soon as I joined, it happened. It was either written before I joined or right after I joined.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, it's a brilliant track. It's my favorite one off the album. Why? I don't want to ask you the crappy female question because I don't. It is though, isn't it? It's kind of like the more you ask that question, the more you make it a big thing. Um, but a particular thing that stands out to me with Jeff is that he is very, key in pushing females forward. He always has females, like for instance, now he's with Carmen Vandenberg, from Bones and stuff like that, and she's a phenomenal player as well. Um, I mean, do you think, is that a conscious thing that he does, or is it just? I mean, why? I mean, it's not that you're not good enough to do the job. You definitely, are good enough to do the job. So why not? But yeah, why do you think it is that he likes helping us females out, shall we say, and giving us a voice that we deserve?
Well, I was the first in a long line of women he's had in his band.
Yeah.
It didn't happen before. Um, I think in part he's got to feel comfortable with people he's with. I mean, he's got to have respect, obviously, and know that they can do the job and
100%.
have a comfort level. And since when I met him as a fan and a super diehard fan, and he knew that I knew all of his stuff. So I think that made him feel comfortable. And then combined with hearing my first two records, uh, he's the kind of guy that always wants to try something new. So, and at that point, I had played with Michael Jackson for two tours.
Yeah.
Um, God, I lose track of years. But his manager said he also wants to have somebody that's done some big tours, so he knows they're not going to, freak out in front of a big audience.
So I guess after you've been touring like that with Michael Jackson for that long, I mean, you're seriously at the top of your game as far as your chops are concerned, aren't they? Like you're on it. You're on fire.
Yeah, you know, I hadn't played for more than a couple thousand people before I joined Michael, so it was a huge elevation.
Oh my God, that's nuts, Jennifer. Oh my
I mean,
God.
I had been playing, gosh, I was doing the showcase thing in Hollywood where you might be playing for 100 people for most of it when you're doing your original music. So honestly, I went from that to playing to 50,000, 80,000 people. So that was a huge jump, you know, and it takes some rewiring of your brain to feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But I mean that's a great foundation to then jump to Jeff's band. And I will say in Michael's band there was two guitar players, two keyboard players, bass and drums, so it was a big band. And if I screwed something up, it's not going to throw anybody because there's so much going on in every
Okay.
song. Now, when I'm with Jeff, the responsibility went through the roof because all of a sudden I am the harmony. So if I screw something up, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So
So,
it was way, way, way more pressure to play with Jeff. And it's much more complex music as well. I mean, Michael, the number one goal of playing his stuff, aside from the beat it solo and playing a couple other solos, is groove.
yeah.
That's number one with that kind of music. And that helped with Jeff as well. Because, I spent 10 years playing with some of the best players in the world. And I remember after the Bad tour, I went back and played with some players I had played with before. And all of a sudden I thought, how come you guys suck now?
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
Day by day, when you're playing with guys that are, on everybody's record. Ricky Lawson had
Yeah.
played with Whitney Houston, Lionel Richie. He was one of the number one calls on drums. Greg Fillinganes is probably on every record you own. That
Yeah, it's
level of
a different
musician.
league. It's a different league, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, guys that it's just second nature. I mean, I remember I met Greg Fillingane's mother on the Bad tour, and she said, yeah, he was picking songs off the radio when he was 3.
Oh, get out of it. Exactly that. That's, yeah, you're born that way for sure. I guess you've got this extra pressure as well when you're with someone like Jeff because he's your hero. So you don't want to fuck it up because of that.
Well, dig this. Here's the story. I was already kind of crapping myself, just hoping, because I looked up to those guys on a pedestal. I mean, whether it's Simon Phillips or Max Middleton, people that had played on his records during his career, all of a sudden I'm supposed to see myself on this level, and it was a little bit of anxiety, to say the least. I knew I could work my ass off, but would I be good enough? I just didn't know. And I was driving with his manager down to his house for the first time after I had been hired. And the manager goes, you know, usually the musical director for Jeff's bands are the keyboard players. And since you're triggering guitar synth and you are making the keyboard sounds, you're it. So all of a sudden, I'm not only crapping myself, can I handle the gig, but I am now the musical director.
Oh my lord. Shit. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really awkward for the first week, but Jeff's personality is so down to earth, and he's like a little kid that just wants to go to the box and play.
Yeah.
And he was always very respectful. Um, needless to say, it worked out. We did a couple records and toured the world for 3 years, which was really intense, really nonstop intense. So, and I spent all of my time that I wasn't touring or rehearsing writing. I was always writing, and most of those songs, well, a lot of the songs that I wrote for him that didn't make his records ended up on my whatever record. So that was a really prolific period of time.
Do you miss it?
No. I mean, most people would say, "Don't you want to go back?" It was so loud. My ears are forever damaged.
I know.
It's if it was a metal band that was always on 11, I would have just worn plugs and got used to it. But he's the kind of guy that would go from 11 down to a whisper. And if you have plugs in, you just miss so much nuance. And I invariably would find that, because I did try it a few times, I would find that I didn't realize I had this ridiculous delay on my sound that I couldn't hear because my ears were plugged. And now, since then, I've gotten a system the Sensophonics company puts out called 3D Ambient in-ear monitors. And although it's not you know, I always want things to be invented that aren't quite there yet, but it's probably the best you can get now. So you have, I think, three drivers in your ears, plus you have a microphone in each ear. And
Okay.
that goes to a control box where you can control how much ambient sound that you get. So that means that I use it all the time, whether I go to see a show or a comedian, because at some point during the night, the comedian will scream into the mic, and I can't handle it. I can't handle sirens, and it's just
You'll get
too much.
tinnitus. You
But
get
when I sit
tinnitus.
in with a band, for instance, well, it destroys the frequencies in your certain frequencies in your ear that your ear takes a minimum of 48 hours to repair. And if you're playing gigs every night, it's just not going to repair. So I listen on stage at about one third of the level that everybody else hears. But during the time I was with Jeff, I just wasn't wearing ear protection. And sometimes I would be on my way to sound check and my ears were hot and they kind of hurt before we started playing. So although we keep in touch, you know, I love him to death. I love his music. I think he's the greatest guitar player that ever lived on so many levels. Um, and I'm really grateful for the time I had with him. But it's okay not doing that. In fact, I'm getting pretty burnt out from travel altogether. And having this lockdown has been wonderful because I launched in August, I launched a thing called guitarcloudsymposium.com. And it was so cool. 4 really intense days with the original lineup was Neely Brosh, who played with Tony McAlpine
Yeah.
and Death Clock and Cirque du Soleil. Gretchen Menn, um, who has toured for years with a Zeppelin tribute called Zepparella, and she's got some really great records out herself. And Vicky Genfan, acoustic tapper, singer, songwriter, and I've toured with all of them. So that was the first lineup, and we got people from all over the world coming to learn from us for 4 really intense days. And I designed the classes like TED Talks, like TED.com, where anything that you have to say, each of us had 6 of our favorite musical subjects, and each subject had to be within 20 minutes.
Okay.
And so in an hour, you get 3 subjects, and then a half-hour Q&A period, and then it moves on to the next teacher. So in 4 days, you get 24 subjects from 4 different teachers in 18 hours, and it goes from Friday to Monday. And the Monday is a celebration party where I managed to drink an entire bottle of champagne by myself and had a mighty good time. So the next one launching is October 16th to 19th.
So are you doing that this year then?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing it every 2 months.
Oh,
Guitar
really?
Cloud Symposium.
Guitar Cloud Symposium. Well, that sounds amazing. Okay, so you're doing that all online. Well, I should sign up to one of these and get some lessons then.
It's pretty fun. You know, it's a huge variety of subjects, going from open tunings on acoustic guitar to scales and arpeggios. I actually started out by talking about brain science and the most ideal way to learn music as a foundation for the weekend. And I get into intervallic stuff to tapping, you know, all my favorite subjects. I have one on the whammy bar and whammy pedal. I'll show, you know, all the ways that I use it because it's part of my voice, and
Yeah.
trying to make the guitar more vocal. The whammy bar especially just takes it through the roof.
Yeah, it does. It gives it that really nice feel. I haven't actually got into the whammy bar yet. I'm yet to venture into that. But tapping was your thing, wasn't it? That was kind of how you started, was the tapping.
Yeah, well, I got into it when I was at Musicians Institute, and there was a fellow classmate named Steve Lynch who, well, I'll back up. Every month we would get a seminar by some heavyweight, whether it was Pat Metheny, Lee Ritenour, Tommy Tedesco, and one month it was Emmett Chapman who invented the instrument called the stick. And that is 10 strings five bass strings, five melody strings, and there's no picking. It's all tapped. And that was before Van Halen, he was on his rise to fame, but not that well known. And so Steve, it planted a seed in his head, and he started experimenting and came up with a system for tapping on guitar. And I listened to it, and I thought, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. So I took, well, after school was over, I asked for his demos he was working on, and I tried to learn what he was doing, and it kind of kicked my butt. So I went and took a lesson, and then it just cracked open my head to start adventuring with it. And I went berserk in the beginning for sure.
So what kind of tips would you give me as a beginner? Like I said, I've been playing for about 6 months, and I try to be very strict with myself, and I try and do like half an hour at least every day. But I mean, I feel like I'm at that stage now where I'm really frustrated because I want to run, but I'm so not ready to run. It's like I'm not quite there, but I want to play like you.
When I teach, I try to spoon feed theory and scales and memorizing the tools of the trade, and I'll spoon feed it along with having you learn stuff that you're into. If there's a song that you really like, that's where the energy comes from. Oh, I'm playing that song. I'm playing those notes that my favorite player has played, and it just kind of snowballs on itself, I think. It, it's like you must eat your vegetables, and here's this dessert just
Yeah.
lurking right over the corner. And as far as rehearsing, I tell people to spend as much time practicing as you can stand and still enjoy it. Because if you push past that point where you're not really enjoying it, you're not going to keep it up. So if a half hour does it for you, then that's what it is for you at this point.
How often did you practice? I bet you were doing like hours.
Well, when I was 8, it was a half hour a day.
Was it?
Um, yeah, leading up to trying to get into the guitar school, I think it was 3 or 4 hours a day. And after the school was over, I had the luxury of being able to stay at home, and I did 8 or 10 hours a day for quite a while. And in every hour, well, it's not,
I mean, I'm
it's
not
not.
trying to be a musician, so I'll be fine.
Well, I was a real nerd about it. I would do an hour of sight reading, an hour of ear training, an hour of arpeggios, an hour of scales, and just have an egg timer that I would switch every hour. And the funnest part is improvising. So I would do an hour of improv, and as time went on, I would go, maybe one more hour of that, maybe 3 hours of improv.
Yeah, okay, that
So
was
that's kind of
fun.
the payoff.
Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
payoff for learning all that.
So what makes a guitarist great? What makes you stand out? Like, what makes you become someone like you or Jeff Beck or
Boy, that's kind of tough. For me, listening to other players, innovation is something that knocks my socks off. When I hear somebody that's doing something new that really kind of grabs my ear that I haven't heard before, it's great. Um, Preston Reed is an acoustic guitar player he's one of the original tappers, and he was a drummer, so his groove is right on the money. And it's just, I like players that are using a vocabulary that's really different from mine, because it's like listening to a foreign language almost. It's very exotic. For that reason, I like Brad Paisley a lot. And I'm not really into country music, but he's such a badass player at the top of his game. Plus, he's hilarious. His lyrics are just hilarious. Well, the first song I was aware of him doing is called "I Want to Check You for Ticks." That's so out there. And there was I forget what it wasn't that song. There was another song that was kind of a goofy title that he wanted on his first record, and the record company goes, I don't think so. I don't think people are going to go for this. And he won the battle, and that song became a big hit. So after that, they left him alone to be as comedic as he wanted to be.
yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So who else are you listening to at the moment?
I like to listen to a wide variety of stuff. Electronica, Crystal Method. Um, I like really great beatboxers. Like there's a guy named Kid Beyond
Yeah.
that there's probably plenty of YouTubes, but he's got looping down. He does a one-man show that is so impressive. You know, he does everything with his voice and will layer and just create this orchestra of sound. Um, people that are just like the guitar players that are innovative. If there's music out there that's super innovative, yeah, I'm there.
Other
Yeah.
than other than the guitar cloud, what else are you up to at the moment?
Well, there is a worldwide virtual guitar extravaganza that is coming up that I'm lucky enough to be a part of. Some monstrous great players like Steve Vai
Yeah.
is going to be on it coming up. Was it September 17th?
17th,
I think.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's so cool because all of us musicians, we can't play live, but neither can the crews. The
Mm.
crews that are rely on traveling and setting bands up, and the lighting guys and everybody involved in shows can't work right now. So it's to benefit them. So I'm really proud to be part of it.
What's it called? Guitar.
Six String Salute.
Six string salute. That's it. Yeah. I know you haven't got. You haven't got your guitars there because I wanted to talk to you a bit about your gear and stuff like that and your guitars because you've got that incredible. Is it a Jackson guitar, the one that you have with the kind of African painting on it?
No, Washburn. Yeah, I've
It's
been
a
with
Washburn.
Washburn for a
Okay.
while. Yeah. The latest model is called the Parallax, and that's the first 24 fret guitar I've had. I do have them here, but I can't
You
plug
can't
in.
play them. No, I just wondered if I could have a look. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's 2 seconds. Yeah, this
Okay.
the, what you see on the fretboard is actually stickers by a company called neckillusions.com. And I'm really into the steampunk thing, so there's gears there. And it's an incredible material where you could stick it on 3 or 4 times and it will stay and it doesn't leave any residue. It's kind of wild. And
Okay.
this is a string damper
Oh,
that I
that's your
started.
own thing, isn't it? You developed that yourself.
Well, the very first string damper was invented by George Van Epps, who's a jazz player, and he had a much thinner chunk of felt, and his idea was to control overtones when playing clean jazz. But I started using this mainly for tapping, because if you have all 8 fingers busy, it's hard to control the open strings from ringing out.
Yeah.
And I used it for quite a while just for tapping, and now I keep it down almost all the time unless I need an open string, which I can just flip it out of the way, or harmonics, and it just keeps things cleaner.
So is it kind of like when you palm mute something? Is that kind of creating a similar thing or not?
No, uh, it's less than that. Like if I have this down and I strum all the strings, you will still hear all of it, but it's just not going to ring out as long
I know,
as
I
a
see what you
normal
mean. Yeah.
string would. And especially when you have distortion, that can get really out of control if there's not a way to dampen it. So
Okay.
I've been using it for decades now, and I always have a Floyd Rose. Hello. Um, Ever since I read articles of Eddie Van Halen when he first got into it, I thought, oh man, there's finally a tremolo that has a locking system that won't completely go out of tune. So I've been using that since the early 80s. What else? I've got
You've got
this
quite a
thing
lot of
here is a bracket.
you've got
What's
quite a lot
that?
you've got quite a lot of pickups on there. Are they there's a so you've got two single coils and then have you got a humbucker as well? No.
Yeah, yeah, these are Fishman Fluence pickups. This is from their Stratocaster set, and this is called the Modern. And I'm horrible about dusting these things. It's embarrassing, but there you go. Um,
You're too busy
and normally
playing.
I have right, that's a good excuse.
Yeah.
I normally have a Fishman Triple Play wireless MIDI system that goes here, and there's a controller that sits on the body, so I can change synthesizer sounds that are in my laptop. And that's a phenomenal system compared to when I was with Jeff. The synth systems 20 years ago were so slow, you really couldn't solo with them. It was only good for playing pads.
Yeah.
So now you can get a Moog sound and do some Jan Hammer kind of stuff. It's awesome.
That's really
And
good.
that standard 5-way switcher and try to get it all in. You know
Wonderful.
what?
I
I
love
started
it.
doing
So
for
what?
Zoom lessons.
So yeah, I know Zoom lessons. That's how I've been learning on Zoom.
Yeah.
So that's your main guitar right now, is it? And is that a signature guitar?
It's not signature, but it is custom
That's
because I've been used to using a Gibson scale for so long. Uh, the ones that you get off the rack or Fender scale, so they had to make a special neck for me, and then I put the Fishman pickups in instead of Duncan's. Other than that, it's pretty. Oh, here's something that's really cool. This is called a Stevens Cutaway, and it's a very different cutaway design, and it just allows you to get up to the very highest frets easily without struggling. So that's kind of a cool innovation.
Yeah, so that kind
And
of
I
goes
use
in. I'm just looking at mine. Yeah, mine's not. I've got a Jackson at the moment, this one, which is quite nice. But
okay.
okay, so yours is a lot thin. So round here, it gets a lot thinner then, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, it's
okay.
very different. Very unique.
Yeah, I've not been playing up this end yet. I haven't ventured up here. I'm still up there. But I do.
Well,
I want to try some of the tapping stuff though. I think that's sort of where I'd like to venture to next. But yeah, that's a nice guitar, and I love those stickers as well because they're really good. They'd actually be quite useful for me because I'm terrible at remembering where I am on the fret. Like if my guitar
well,
chooses like go up to the third fret, or not the third, but like fifth or sixth or seventh, and I'm like, hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I had a sticker, that
well,
would help me get there quicker.
there's a lot of different designs you can find on their website, neckillusions.com. Steve Vai has a bunch of drawings that he did, but you can get custom ones too.
Oh,
Like for my
okay.
last record, I had the logo for the record made in stickers and did a bunch of photo shoots. And then next time I changed my strings, I changed it out to another design. And one other thing I'll tell you about is this is a company called Lockit, where this is a spring-loaded lock. So you don't need hardware to have your guitar be secure. So I love this. I've been using these for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it? Because yeah, I've had that where I've put my strap on and then it's fallen off, and I luckily managed to catch it. But yeah,
Yeah, it's neat.
not good
Yeah.
if that hits the floor. So how
No.
does it make you feel when you've got that guitar in your hand? Does it make you feel different?
Yeah, especially at this point in my life, I've become hyper aware of uh, the healing properties of frequency. And I know if I have a shit day and I go in the studio and I play for an hour, it changes your brain chemistry, and in a very good way. Almost always. I mean, sometimes my mood just doesn't move, no matter how much I play. Especially if I'm pressured to learn a bunch of stuff and it's not,
That's a
an
different
easy.
thing, I guess, isn't it? That's because you've got
Yeah,
pressure. But when
yeah.
it's yeah, it's funny because I feel like this has saved me during this crazy period that we've all been going through, because it's the only time I can switch off. You just can kind of lose
Oh yeah,
yourself in it, can't you?
yeah. It's a focused meditation, really. It's yeah. It's you get addicted to it just
Oh, I
because
know.
you'll see how it changes your brain chemistry, and then
Yeah.
you'll notice that if you go a few days without, you might start to get bitchy.
I need my hit. Give me my hit. Yeah. Have you
Yeah.
and do you feel like it's in a way when you're playing it, do you feel like it's an extension of your personality? Do you feel like your personality comes through your playing?
Yeah, Yeah, there's been so many years that we've been together. So,
It's like that though, isn't it? Have you got names for yours?
no, no, I know that's a thing, and I tried to come up with names several times, and then nothing ever stuck. So it's just the guitar, the main guitar,
Yeah.
the not main guitar. There's definitely a relationship, and you really notice if you ever have a guitar stolen, then you notice how much it means to you. Because, I've got, I'm not a guitar collector. I probably have six or seven at home, and I only ever play one for the most part. And I've had guitars stolen several times, and it's just devastating because you're so used to every nuance of your main guitar that having another one that's the same color and same specs, it's never the same. Yeah, luckily, knock on wood, both of the ones that got stolen, I got back.
Did you?
Strange
How did you
story.
get them back?
Yeah. Oh God. Well, the last one, it was the stupidest thing. Wherever I go in the world, I always bring my guitar into the restaurant. I never leave it in the car.
Yeah.
And for some reason, when I came home in Portland, I'm feeling like, I'm home. Left the guitar in the car, and after a meal, I came out and the window was smashed, the guitar was gone. And it was around New Year's, and I had a New Year's gig, and I never would have even thought of this because I spent 20 years in LA, and theft happens every day in LA, and you are not going to get on the news because somebody took your guitar. But because Portland is a much smaller community, uh, somebody called the news. And at this gig I did on New Year's, they sent a news crew down, and I told a little bit about the history of the guitar. It had been on the Jackson tours and on the Jeff Beck tours, so there was a lot of mojo in it. So it was enough of a story for them. Well, somebody was watching the news, and the person that found it tossed in the bushes. It was probably some crackhead that realized they couldn't really sell it because it was so unique with autographs all over it. It's obvious who it belongs to. So somebody ditched it in the bushes, and somebody else was out walking their dog, and they saw it and grabbed it and put a lost and found notice on Craigslist. And the person that had seen me on the news happened to look at Craigslist and
Oh
made the
my
connection.
God.
It is an amazing number of events, and I was without it for 3 days, and I was trying to psych myself up. Well, I really did want to get into this other guitar, and now I'm in it. But when I got it back, it was like, oh, geez. And now it's that guitar is in a Chinese museum. I,
What's he doing
I
there?
retired it. Well,
Oh,
I retired it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've been playing this Washburn Parallax for 3 or 4 years now, and so that's become my main guitar, and I'm used to it.
that's the one that you're talking about that got stolen. That's the one I was on about then, wasn't it? It's with the artwork in the middle of it, and
Yeah.
you've got all the signatures around.
I got to go to South Africa on the last Michael Jackson tour, and I'm really into African art and African music.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of art down there. I got batiks that people were selling on the waterfront, probably a dozen of them. And so the woman named Pamelina that has done several of my album covers and jackets and all kinds of stuff, I gave one of the batiks to her and said, "Can you put that on a guitar?" And so that's what's been on it for, what, 20 years? More than 20 years.
Jeez.
And then as I run into people, I think one of the first ones was Jimmy Page. He came to one of the Jeff Beck shows, and so I tapped him for an autograph, and I got Brad Paisley and Les Paul and
You've got Les
all kinds of,
Paul. Oh my God.
yeah. Yeah, I got to play at one of the very last shows he played at before he passed away, 6 months before he passed. There was a tribute to him at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, and I was asked to do some playing. In fact, I was on the road in my RV doing my solo show when I got the call, "Would you play?" And it was, I don't know, a month away or something. And they go, "Would you play the song Lover?" Because that was his first multi-track recording.
Yeah.
And I said yes before I even heard it. And then I then I listen to it and I go, oh shit, this ain't easy. Because that's when he used trickery, where he played it at one speed and then double speeded it with his, it's just crazy, crazy fast. So I was able to work it out tapping. That's the only way I could get the speed happening to do what he did. And then honestly, in the middle of it, it got too difficult, and so I played Flight of the Bumblebee because it was easier.
I love it that Flight of the Bumblebee was easier.
Yeah,
That's
it
how
was.
tough it was. Okay.
The coolest thing of the whole event, I mean, I was kind of crapping myself doing it because I was playing alone with a looper, which that's pretty tricky right there. But I'm glad I didn't know at the time, but he was on the side of the stage watching it. So once I found that out afterwards, it was like, yes, that's a career highlight for sure.
Okay, well, listen, Jennifer, I'm going to let you go. It was really lovely chatting to you. It's such a shame that we couldn't get the guitars out, and then you could show me some stuff. But I understand. And I hope everything's all right back home, and you get to go
Yeah.
back, and it's all good.
Yeah, it's crazy times, man. You just don't know. So many people have lost their homes. I just hope I have one to go home to. So knock on wood or
Fingers
plastic.
crossed. Well, listen,
Thank
stay safe, and I'd love to see you on one of your Guitar Cloud shows. That would be quite cool.
Come on, October 16th, join on up.
I will. Brilliant. All right, well, take care. Thank you.
Okay.